How did a man charged with assaulting someone in 2015 on behalf of ISIS not only enter Canada 3 years later, but also pass multiple security screenings to get full Canadian citizenship? All of this before allegedly plotting another attack here in Toronto in 2024. That's the question being asked over and over on Parliament Hill this week.
Your government issued a visa to somebody who was allegedly in a 2015 ISIS propaganda video. Are you really telling Canadians that that's how our system should work?
How is it that a foreign government knew more than we did in Canada about somebody that was on Canadian soil for 6 years?
What other terrorists are walking the streets here in Canada right now, waiting to commit terrorist acts? What the hell is going on?
For most of us, this story started a few weeks ago, when Canadian police made a pretty shocking announcement. They said they had just managed to foil a, quote, serious violent attack in Toronto. That attack, they said, was meant to cause mass casualties, and it was imminent.
We're pretty confident how close they were to moving from simply having those tools and then moving on to actioning that threat.
Police arrested these two men, 62-year-old Ahmed El-Didi and his son, 26-year-old Mustafa El-Didi. They were charged with a total of 9 offenses, including
conspiracy to commit murder for the benefit or in association with a terrorist group, participating in an activity of a terrorist group, as well as weapons charges, possession of an axe and possession of a machete.
Sources later told CBC the two men had actually filmed themselves holding weapons in front of an ISIS flag, pledging allegiance to the group. And then we found out not only was the elder El-Didi arrested for plotting an attack in Toronto, he was also being charged with committing an assault on behalf of ISIS in 2015, somewhere outside of Canada. Now, some of the details we're about to share are disturbing. There's a video, an ISIS propaganda video that allegedly shows the assault. We won't show it to you because it's extremely violent, but we can show you some tightly cropped screenshots. The video shows a man dressed in black, using a sword to dismember someone in an orange jumpsuit.
Connecting the dots here, it is the police clearly believe that this is the person, and that this person, at the very least, was busy hacking a dead body.
And here's the thing. This allegedly happened 3 years before El-Didi came to Canada.
It is clear that this is something we have to take seriously, and we need to find answers for why this happened.
Canadians have a right to know what went wrong.
The House of Commons National Security Committee will conduct a probe on how 2 accused terror suspects got into the country.
Going into these hearings, one of the biggest questions MPs had was how and when these 2 men were able to enter Canada. Here's what we've learned so far. In December 2017, the elder El-Didi applied for a visitor permit to Canada, but that application was refused. It's not clear why, but border officials said they don't believe it was because of a security issue. Shortly after that, he reapplied, and that time it was accepted. In 2018, El-Didi entered Canada for the first time at Pearson Airport in Toronto and claimed asylum. A year later, his refugee claim was approved. In 2021, he was granted permanent residence. And earlier this year, just 2 months before his arrest, he was given Canadian citizenship. The timeline for El-Didi's son is a bit different. His first interaction with Canadian officials was in July of 2019, when he applied to study in Canada. That application was denied. We don't know the full details of that either, but officials weren't convinced his application was genuine. A few months later, in January 2020, he was granted an American study permit. Our CBC colleagues confirmed he was registered at Iowa Wesleyan University, a now defunct college in Iowa, for 1 semester. Then, just a month after he moved to the US, he crossed the Canada-US border near Fort Erie and filed for asylum. 2 years later, in July 2022, that application was also approved. The biggest takeaway here, both men passed multiple Canadian security screenings. The elder El-Didi, for example, went through intensive screenings to become a refugee, then again to become a permanent resident, and once again to become a citizen. So the next obvious question then became, what happens in those screenings? There's still quite a bit of mystery around what these security screenings actually look like. CSIS in particular is tight-lipped about their process, but they've been clear about one thing.
The first instance where this Canadian Security Intelligence Service became aware that this individual could pose a potential threat was in June of 2024.
Officials from all departments testified that until another country warned CSIS about the elder LDD earlier this year, they had no idea the ISIS video existed. And the analysts we spoke to said that didn't really surprise them.
You don't ever really hear Canada giving the Americans or the Brits important intelligence. It's always the other way around.
Our great limitation is that we don't have our own foreign intelligence service. We're not always able to ask Canadian questions, if you like, and try and find information relevant to our concerns on the basis of having a spy service operating abroad. We just don't have that.
But we also learned from these hearings that there were risk indicators that came up on LDD's file over the years. 2 in 2018 while he was applying for refugee status, and another on his permanent resident application. So what exactly is a risk indicator?
It can range from anything like incomplete information being provided, some deceptive or fraudulent information being provided, potential membership in organizations considered to be a security risk to Canada, or membership in a terrorist organization.
It's not clear exactly which risk indicators were on LDD's file, but it was something that made immigration or border officials concerned enough to want a second opinion. And once a risk indicator is flagged, it's up to intelligence officials to investigate it. What we don't know is how they do this.
So unfortunately, I'm unable to answer in detailed specifics the capabilities, methodologies, and tradecraft that we employ in this or any other case. To do so would jeopardize the integrity of our operations and our ability to conduct our operations securely.
All we know for sure is that all of LDD's early risk indicators were resolved. A few years later, in 2023, his citizenship application went through another CSIS screening, and that too was resolved.
The key question is really where the particular indicators, should they have been resolved, or should more closer examination of those risk indicators really have taken place that might have led officials to conclude that Mr. LDD, the father, should not have been admitted to Canada in the first place.
It's frankly a glaring oversight on the part of CSIS. The system that they have is designed to catch things like this. So I can only assume that this had to be an element of human error.
Canada's public safety minister, on the other hand, has a very different take. He says this isn't a failure or even a mistake. He's proud of Canada's spy agency because they helped catch the LDDs before they could carry out an attack.
This is the way that the investigative and national security system should work.
But for Conservative MPs at the hearing, that didn't sit well.
Do you really think that the system is working if somebody like this, who's an alleged ISIS terrorist, who, if he was even a little bit more productive, would have resulted in mass casualties in Toronto? Do you really think that that's how the system should work? Do you really think that this is not a colossal failure of your government?
I am very proud of the work that the RCMP and CSIS did in thwarting this particular case.
And according to at least one recent government study of the screening program, close to 2/3 of security analysts themselves agree there's room for improvement.
Let's be honest, unless we have people who are both have the education and training and experience to properly identify these risks, unless we have people who are on the ground in these countries to identify these risks, we're guessing. And it's disingenuous for the government to convey to Canadians that somehow we have a robust security system in place. We do not.
It's a universe where human talent and technological skills have to combine, and I think it's probably fair to say that CBSA is underperforming in that regard, and probably its security partners are as well.
When pressed on that question during the hearing, here's how the CBSA responded.
We don't rely on a single point of failure. We have multiple lines of defense, and we're asking ourselves, do improvements need to be made? And that's, I think, a powerful message for Canadians is we do want to know if improvements can be made, and if there can be, we will make improvements.
One of the questions that came up several times at the hearing, should our security officials be using better tech to scour the internet during these kinds of probes?
The federal government is increasingly starting to use facial recognition techniques, but that is not across the board.
Should CSIS or any of the security screening partners, IRCC, CBSA, should they have had access to this video or any kind of surrounding intelligence about Mr. El-Didi's activities, alleged activities on the part of the Islamic State? That remains an unanswered question.
We are asking ourselves, do we need to do more in that particular space? It is a daunting challenge, but we are asking ourselves that question.
For now, the investigation into how this could have happened continues. And according to the analysts we spoke to, there's no doubt this will have at least some impact on how people coming into Canada are screened.